Good morning. Thank you for staying with Citizen TV. I hope you're having a fantastic holiday. My name is Trevor Ombija. As Kenyans join in celebrating Labor Day, we have an extensive coverage for you spanning from the Uhuru Gardens right here in Nairobi, where the celebrations will be held. Jimmy Mbogo is standing by there, and Dennis Otieno as well. We'll give you wall-to-wall coverage of the entire process. But the questions abound from the workers. Is there anything to celebrate? Are we in breach of the International Labour Organization, that's the ILO laws, where every worker should not take home less than a third of their pay slip? What is the way forward? What are the questions that the workers have? That's the focus we're having this day on the Labor Day celebrations. But before we get into that, we'll speak to my guest who already in studio. Raphael Olala is here as a lecturer at the College of Human Resource Management, also a board member at the COTU. Also, Edgar Washika is here, advocate of the High Court. We'll find out, are we in breach of the law? What needs to be done? What more can be done to adjust the workers and ensure that they go home happy? The biggest question is there respite for the Kenyan worker on this Labor Day? That's a conversation we'll be having later on. There's a lot going on the papers as well. Why Kenya risks censure by Global Labour Body over rising deductions on employees' pay. But first, before we get into that conversation, let's cross over to the Uhuru Gardens, where the celebrations will be held today, and speak to our very own Jimmy Mbogo. Jimmy, good morning. It's good to see you. What are the concerns that the workers are thinking of raising today?
All right, a very good morning to you too, Trevor. Of course, as you said, it's quite a bright day here at Uhuru Gardens. The preparations are underway. From all indication, we understand that at around 10 a.m. the president will be making his way here. And of course, security has been tightened, as you would expect with any presidential function. Now, this year's Labor Day celebration comes on the back of a lot of concerns from the working class, and particularly some of the major issues. Number one is unemployment. Number two, just looking at all the labor export that has been happening and all the drama that we have seen in that space. And of course, we'll be giving you all that information and what has been happening in that space. Remember, this year's Labor Day celebration comes on the back of what happened last year. One of the things that the president was advocating for then was a lot of labor export, but we have seen in the last couple of months what has been happening in that space. And I'm here with my colleague Dennis Otieno, and we just want to understand, Dennis, of course, we've been covering what has been happening within the labor market, and one of the things that we want to know is what are some of the things that are going to change this year from the people that you've been speaking to from when you got here earlier on. What are they saying from the labor movements? What are they saying in regards to where we are as a country?
Yes, indeed, Jimmy. It's another 1st of May, another moment for Kenyans all over the world. I mean Kenyans and indeed the rest of the world, to commemorate and honor the struggles that workers in each and every country have been going through. Of course, Jimmy, we do, find ourselves asking ourselves so many questions as to whether indeed the workers, plight has actually been looked at indeed. Looking at some of the challenges that workers have been facing, of course, we've been having the issue of, the tax burden. I mean, many have been looking at that and, hoping that the government would actually review, some of the taxes that so many salaried workers have actually been, undergoing for the past year. Of course, looking at what has been in the finance bill, indeed, many Kenyans are hoping that this particular finance bill will have a bit of a reprieve for them, even as it was tabled yesterday. We've seen another challenge of, salary stagnation. That indeed has been, one of the key things. Looking at, some of the public servants, most of them have not had, reviews in their pay for the past few years. And even if we do get to talk about, the minimum wage being, revised upwards, still we have the issues of inflation, which has been eating into the budgets of so many of these workers. So as much as many of them would be looking up to, some of the influential leaders will be here to make their speeches, they're hoping that there will be, some hope and something solid, for them to take home, other than most of the promises that we've actually been hearing. Jimmy, I don't know, looking at what employers have been saying.
Yes.
We've seen the Federation of Kenyan employers, especially looking at the CEO, Jacqueline Mugo, indeed raising concerns about what employers have been going through. I mean, some of these mandatory deductions that they've been forced to chip in, many of them say they cannot sustain. And if they are to implement most of these measures that the government is saying, they will indeed have to, let go of some workers. We've seen quite a number of firms in the country, of course, the layoffs that have been announced in the past 1 year being, a very key concern for most of them. From what you see, Jimmy, what do you expect, going forward, especially looking at the speeches that will be made?
All right, so Dennis, one of the things that we know is expected to come out, and this is something that we also had in last year's celebration, where the Federation of Kenya Employers has been decrying the numerous deductions, and of course that has an impact to the workers and also to their employers, because, I mean, if your employee cannot be able to sort of give you your best based on what they are earning because of the stresses that they have to deal with, that has a direct impact to their output when it comes to their work. But also, Trevor, there's a number of things that we expect to come out in this year's celebration. One of them, and something that I alluded to earlier on, this is the question around high unemployment and high levels, high employment freezes that we are seeing from companies, where companies are sort of taking a wait-and-see approach, cutting back on their spending and sort of trying to ensure that their workforce is as lean and as effective as it can be. And of course, just looking at some of the data that we have seen from the Federation of Kenya Employers, what we know so far is that there is a 12.7% unemployment rate, particularly when it comes to the ages between 15 and 34, which accounts for, in that category, they account for about 67% of all unemployment numbers. The other thing that we have seen this being the third Labor Day celebration under the Kenya Kwanza administration, is the fact that there has been massive layoffs and business restructuring. We've seen a number of companies laying off their workers. We've seen a number of them just making sure that they reduce that. One of the most notable one is the layoffs that we saw from G4S, particularly, where at least 400 employees were expected to be laid off. This is during that restructuring, and that is not the only one. We have had the likes of CFC Motors. We've had the likes of, and particularly players in the horticultural space. We've seen those numbers increasing. So previously we have been speaking about 3 million formerly employed Kenyans, and we know at the moment that number has significantly reduced, but also there have been some companies that have been making investments into the country. Now, Trevor, the other thing that I talked about earlier, this is the question around labor exports. And we know that in last year's address, the president talked about this, trying to encourage a lot of Kenyans to look for jobs outside the country. And of course, the counter argument to that has been, what country wants to export its labor force instead of using that labor force to build the country? And of course, it has been one of those areas that has a lot of contention and varying opinion depending on who you speak to. But from the government, they were talking about the MOUs that they were signing, and you will remember the controversial one, particularly with the German government, that then was disputed, which was expected to export about 250,000 jobs every month. And of course, those are some of the things that we expect to be addressed during this year's Labor Day celebration. The one thing that we cannot go without speaking about, this is industrial action, and this is something that we have been seeing last year. You will remember around this time, one of the things that we were speaking about at the time was the industrial action by practitioners, particularly in the medical field. And we see these squabbles continuing on, and the MOU implementations, and a lot of conversations around that. And also, just given the structure of our economy, a majority of the Kenyan workforce is in the informal sector, which has been a problem, considering whenever government says it wants to raise taxes, they cannot. These are considered hard to tax areas. But on the counter argument, when you speak to Juakali sector players, when you speak to farmers, their question is, I am barely making it in the current set of economy, and so what do you expect from me in terms of taxation? And that has been quite a pain point for a lot of people in the country. Now, the last thing that I want to speak about, Trevor, this is revising the labor laws. Now, the conversation has largely been trying to center on digital workspaces and the gig economy, and how do we get to bring this particular sector into the tax bracket? How do we ensure that they also pay their fair share of taxes in the country? And of course, a lot of contention, particularly within that space, targeting influencers, targeting those who are working within the digital ecosystem. And of course, these are some of the things that we expect will be taking center stage in today's celebration. And we know that the labor output in the country has been diminishing, particularly in terms of their contribution to the GDP, and that is quite a concern, because when you look at more developed market, the labor market contributes significantly to the output of that country and to the wealth of the country. And of course, Trevor, those are just some of the highlights that we expect to hear from the people who will be speaking. And also, how can trade unions be strengthened? Again, there has been a lot of conversation around whether trade unions are now in bed with government, and what is the net effect of that to the workforce, to the people that these trade unions are expected to represent. So these are the issues that we expect as journalists. Of course, we expect this to be central when it comes to the speeches that are going to be addressed, and also the fact that when you see a lot of noise coming from those who've been seeking jobs outside the country, and the Ministry of Labour being at the center of that conversation, we want to know what measures is the government going to put in place to address those issues. Of course, when you hear civilians also just speaking about being duped by the government, it continues to just paint a very negative picture in terms of the trust deficit between the citizens and their government. They cannot trust the government to deliver on what it promises. Remember, this is the government that came into being on the promise of creating employment, on the promise of taking care of the young people who majority are unemployed. So when you look at the unemployment rate in the country, it's of course high, and that just looking at that data, of course, we'll be trying to examine what has been there. But also, Trevor, just speaking to the question of employers and some of the things that they have been speaking about. One of them is a lack of tax policy predictability, and this has been quite a pain point. It was there last year and also this year. A lot of employers saying these deductions that keep changing every now and then. Their members, that is FKE members, have been complaining that we cannot plan ahead, and if we cannot plan ahead in terms of our operations and where we are expected to spend our money, then that becomes a challenge, even in terms of just planning for the outlook of the company. Now, we'll be here, my colleague Dennis is still here with me, and these are some of the issues that we are hoping will be addressed by the end of the day. Now, Dennis, I know there has been a lot of conversations around farmers and around empowering farmers, and I know this is a subject that is quite dear to you. I just want to know, what can farmers expect from today's celebration, from today's announcements? What are some of the things that have been at the core of their stress?
Indeed, the cost of production has always been, the biggest issue facing a majority of the farmers in the country. A bulk of the farmers in the country, of course, we know, is made up of small-scale farmers, most of whom, face the challenge of high input costs. And indeed, I believe they would want to see, what, the measures that the state can put in place, indeed, to ensure that, they get to address the high cost of inputs that a majority of them have been facing. We are still, having most of them looking at the planting season. It has been raining in some parts of the country, and indeed, they will want to see, that relief when it comes to getting those crucial inputs that they are using. We still do have some empty seats here around Uhuru Garden, but I believe, Jimmy, maybe as time goes by, before the influential leaders get to settle here, they will get to, most of them will have arrived in this particular venue. Looking at, the entire labor labor force in the country, we do have, looking at the statistics, of 20 million Kenyans, in the labor force, and a majority of them are still in the informal sector. They may not all they will not all be here, but indeed wherever they are, they will be hoping that leaders present here through their speeches will get to make speeches that will give them hope when it comes to addressing their plight and their working conditions in the country. Back to you in studio, Trevor.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks, Jimmy Mbogo and Dennis Otieno speaking to us from Uhuru Gardens, where the 2025 Labor Day celebrations are on course. Then my guests are with me in studio. Raphael Olala is here as a lecturer at the College of Human Resource Management. Thank you so much for making time. We also have Cyprian Ombati, who's the Vice Chairman, UASU. Thank you very much for making time. And Edgar Washika, Advocate of the High Court. Asante sana for making time. And Olala, I'll start with you here. Does the Kenyan worker have a reason to celebrate today?
Thank you, Trevor. Kenyan worker has a reason to celebrate. Following the history of Labor Day, way back from 1886, thereabout, and specifically in the Kenyan labor space, we were in a situation, history tells us, we were in a situation that people could not have reasons for negotiations. People did not have ability to talk about their rights at workplace. Employees who are maimed and harassed at workplace. But now I myself am a victim of harassment way back in 1998 and 1999. But now I have a reason, together with other employees in the Republic of Kenya, that then the laws have changed, that then the procedures have changed, the policies have changed. The ILO Convention allows employees now to negotiate, to organize and negotiate. Further to that, then the collective bargaining in each industry actually allows employees in the Kenyan labor space to have their say, to debate on what they would have loved to be paid. That is called equal gain sharing principle. You ask the employer that, hey, I wish to be paid as follows because you made this much. Secondly, then I would wish to notify you that in the disciplinary mechanism in the Republic of Kenya, initially, employees could go home without any reason. An employer would dismiss an employee just because of a feeling. No procedure, no rights, no right of an appeal and all that. But for today, a Kenyan employee would have a right to be fully represented by a trade union representative or an employee of his own choice. Similarly, they have a right to question the employer as to the witnesses that the employer is bringing on board. They also have a right to be provided with for the necessary documentation, the reports, the minutes, and all. And then finally, they have a right of an appeal. When an employer now finally dismisses you and you still believe that the dismissal is unfair and lawful and wrongful in another way, you've got a right to now appeal within a specific prescribed timeline. Therefore, an employee has a reason to celebrate. Of course, there would not have been 100% satisfaction of the expectation or the projection of employees. But so far, I want to believe that employees have a right, reason to celebrate.
Okay. Let me bring in Ombati on this. Do you believe that employees have a reason to celebrate? Does the Kenyan worker have a reason to celebrate today?
When I look at a Kenyan worker and where the context we are in today, I want to say that there is no much to smile about. The reason being that you find that workers have gone under very hardship conditions, beginning with so many taxes on our pay slips that have taken almost close to between 45 to 55% goes to taxes from what we get as workers. You find that the economic times that we are in, even though they are saying the economy is improving, but you find when you look at our pockets, there isn't much there to smile about. And therefore, I want to say that we are at a point where the government needs to relook at the policies that they have in place. Are they pro-workers? A majority of them, I can say they are not. So you find where we are now is, honestly, most workers are not happy because of what they are going through. I have seen even across other sectors, especially if I talk of our education sector, even in universities where workers who have gone maybe through disciplinary procedures. Some are not really satisfied. They have made appeals here and there. You find that it takes long before they are able to be given their verdict. I can say on the Employment Labor Relations Court, yes, I can give them a thumbs up for a lot of work that they have done, but we may need to ask if there is a way they can improve so that if you go there, you are able to be served your justice within maybe 60 days. But sometimes we have people going for even a year, is when now they get their verdict. You find all that time maybe you are suspended, you are on half pay, and you are suffering. So I want to say that we are in a point whereby our government needs to look at workers, prioritize them, so that if we get benefits is when even this economic will be able to grow. Today is Labor Day, but I can say that many workers, yes, they may go there to the field to be like celebrating, but honestly, a majority of them, I want to say, they are not happy.
Okay. Washika?
Yeah, well, for me, I think the issue is even beyond workers that we have and goes to people who are unable to get that work in the first place. So that looking at the Labor Day, it's not just about the people who are currently in employment. The issue should stretch beyond and look at people who have been unable to get that employment in the first place. And I think I agree with Mbati. I think the country is grappling, workers themselves are grappling with the increased taxes. The pay slip is not the same. The figures look the same in terms of what you're earning, but in terms of what is being taken out, it is excessive. And so the workers cannot be happy with that. But for me, like I say, I think the issue should also be considered in terms of people who have been unable to get work. And I think that's one of the major things that throughout the years, government has been trying, at least this government has been trying to say in terms of export of labor and things like this, trying to get employment opportunities for Kenyans outside. But I don't know what success that has achieved, what the success levels of that have been. And so for me, I don't think there'll be much to celebrate on this Labor Day.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that for a bit with the issue of taxation. Is COTU concerned that most workers are taking home less than a third of what they should, which is in contravention with the ILO convention that you actually just mentioned?
Yes, a third is a rule that is provided for in the Employment Act, that actually an employee should be able to retain a third of his salary. And indeed, for the purposes of National Union of Service Employees, which I lead as at now, I wish to notify you that, yes, there are challenges, as my colleagues have indicated, that the pay slip is dwindling. That one is a challenge, and I don't want to refuse the fact that taxation have overgrown the total home take, and the employees are really concerned as well. However, now we are looking at the resultant figure that is looked forward to at the tail end of this program. You see, I'm not a speaker of the government, neither of the capital, but I want to state that if there are programs that are properly and prudently put in place, like the housing that is being talked about, if prudently put in place and it is made to benefit employees or benefit citizens at the tail end of it, well and good. But then the problem is that history don't give us justice in the Republic of Kenya, because from what we have already known in the past is that some of this would be well meant, but later on don't benefit the actual person. So a third rule, yes, it's a challenge to our employees, and it's a concern that we are looking forward to in terms of increase and negotiation of our pay through the collective bargaining agreements that each individual affiliate of COTU would negotiate for their members to ensure that a third is actually carried forward. Trevor, I wish to notify you that you would probably be finding a payslip that is actually speaking of a third and is successful of a third. But later on, at the official financial overload of the employees, the mamamboga down, and the small circles that the employer is not knowing. Finally, the employee would be earning salary today, and tomorrow he's not having salary. These are concerns that we can't deny. We have to put them on the table. Where can you put them on the table? In the negotiations. So that's why I was saying that employees have a right of celebration today to the extent of labor relations. There is space in speeches. There is space in organization, right to organize and to negotiate. That to that extent, that's what I meant by saying that Kenyan employees have reason to smile that their negotiation rights is not curtailed. Of course, financial issues, all employees in the Republic of Kenya, most of them are not happy. That one, I agree with my panelists.
Yeah. Ombati, are those negotiations significant in any way? I mean, you have been in the forefront of WASU, and there's been a lot of push and pull between yourselves and the government.
Yes. You find that when we negotiate, the government usually is the one that delays. For example, when we give out CBAs for negotiations, like the one that we have just ended, you find that it was supposed to begin in 2021, but they come to the table in the year 2024, when it is at the tail end. By the time you finish negotiations, then we have now accrued arrears, which members are supposed to be paid maybe for a period of 2 years or more than that. So the amount becomes huge, and then now government starts saying, now we cannot pay that. But ideally, if they were to follow the way in which negotiations are done, negotiations should be able to end about at least 1 year or 6 months before commencement of a cycle. Like now, you see, CBAs are supposed to begin for a period called 25-29 from July this year. In other words, all workers in Kenya are supposed to get new basic salaries from 1st of July, which is just 2 months away. So what that means is, as we are speaking today, we should have finished all our CBA negotiations. The government has them placed in the budget that is to be read next month. Come July, let my salary change. That's how normally it works. But here in Kenya, the problem we have is that we as unions, we give out our CBAs long time. They receive the CBAs, but they sit on them. So you find now, we will be negotiating maybe from next year. Then we will have back and forth, back and forth. By the time we finish it, we are in the year 2027 or thereabout. But remember, this is salaries were to change from July 25. Again, arrears have accrued. Then now we start strikes. So it is a very simple thing. But this time they promised. For us in our sector, we are waiting. The Cabinet Secretary for Ministry of Education promised that this time negotiations will end before June this year, meaning come July we'll have new salaries. And he said it in the public press. We will put him on task that he delivers on his word. If that is done, I can tell you, you'll never see any of this strike, be it from WASU, doctors, or any other union. You will never see them. The only problem is negotiations begin late. They bring in accrued arrears. Then the government starts running up and down saying we cannot pay that. But if they come on the table, then it is, my salary changes. It is budgeted. Come July, you receive your new salary. We'll have no problem. And we will be able to deliver. Workers will be motivated. So even as we are, I want to tell government that, especially now from WASU, we are expecting that our salaries to change come July. And all other workers. But we are in the media. Have you seen any negotiations? They have not begun. Even for teachers, I saw in the paper they are saying that they are about to look at it. So those are the issues. Now, when we come to strike, members of the public think that we like strikes. It's not us. It is people who are sleeping on their job, right at the ministry level, and therefore the government should be able to look at them. He talked of people don't have work. We have a lot of qualified Kenyans out here who are ready to work if they are given an opportunity. But we have people in the ministries who are sleeping on their job. They are not doing their duties. And now when we are asking for what is supposed to be given, remember, we are not asking out of nowhere. It is in the law that after every 4 years, a worker's salary has to be reviewed. So members of the public have to understand that. It's not that something we are coming out of the blue and saying that we want salary. July 2025, all workers should receive. But when you look at the state officers, they don't even ask. you just find already it has changed. By how much? Thousands of shillings. But for us, there has to be a bruising battle before you get what is rightfully yours. So I think that is where we have a problem. If negotiations are done on time, we will never have problems of strikes in this country.
All right, I'll take a quick break. I'll come to Ashika and find out whether this discrimination can be dealt with in terms of the timelines, the delays in the CBA enactment. Legally, is there any way that that can be challenged and made to be implemented sooner? And then we'll talk about that in just a bit. We're crossing over now and taking a short break, but we're also live at the Uhuru Gardens where Jimmy Mbogo and Dennis Otieno are standing by to give us the latest. That's where the celebrations of Labor Day are happening today. Amid quite a lot of concerns from the workers, most of it over taxation. Some of them say the statements that were made in the last year's Labor Day have not been fulfilled to date. We'll also talk about the minimum wage implementation and how that can be done by employers who are also now crying and saying that there's a chance that they will have to let go some of their employees because of the tough economic times. But then we'll speak about that in terms of the law. How do you ensure that happens? And what are the main concerns that the workers should raise today vis-a-vis what they really expect from the government in return? Those are the people just coming into the Uhuru Gardens, and we are live there also in a short while as the arrivals continue. The celebrations are happening there. Jimmy Mbogo and Dennis Otieno standing by. We'll give you the latest from that region in just a bit. Let's take a quick break. We're back with much more shortly.
Kushirikiana kazini ni kujenga Kenya.